defeat, and the spectacle of weakness, choose ceremony and bureaucracy over real reform. Nowhere is this desperate cycle clearer than in Pakistan's frantic unveiling of its Rocket Force Command after Operation Synindua, a move born not of technological leap, but of humiliation, hoping a new name could cover old failures. Let's begin with the real context behind this announcement. Operation Synindua was not merely a military engagement, it was a watershed moment in South Asian security and a showcase of how war is decided not just with courage, but with weapons, planning, and the unforgiving logic of escalation. In the earliest hours of conflict, Pakistani media boasted of new missiles and the supposed shock they would deliver. But India, moving with the precision and speed of a force that has spent 2 decades investing in integrated air defense and real-time intelligence, systematically destroyed or neutralized every high-value Pakistani asset in range. When Pakistan tried to respond, launching salvos of so-called conventional rockets and surface-to-surface missiles, the result was a rout. Indian Akash Air Defense Systems, SBYDER batteries, and quick-reaction counter-battery forces tracked and intercepted Pakistani launches with near impunity. The rockets, many aged, some imported, most never tested in combat conditions like this, either veered off course, were shot down, or created only minor damage far from their intended targets. Indian airfields operated without interruption, armored columns rolled forward, and Indian missile forces struck back with far greater reach, accuracy, and intensity. The immediate global reaction was sobering. Satellite imagery, independent analysts, and media outlets all confirmed Pakistan's much-advertised missile deterrent had been exposed as militarily irrelevant. And as the dust settled, Pakistani planners realized that it was not just equipment that had failed, but the entire structure of their conventional and tactical doctrines. It was in this moment of vulnerability, after humiliation, not after triumph, that Pakistan's leadership announced the formation of a new Rocket Force Command. The move was not the result of years of development or a masterplan to overhaul doctrine. It was a rush, an act of face-saving. By centralizing its rockets and missiles under a new command, the military hoped to signal resolve and renewed deterrence, to say, in essence, we will not be caught weak again. But organization does not make up for technological failure. The new Rocket Force Command is fundamentally crippled by the same problems that exposed Pakistan's vulnerability in Synindua: a lack of credible, modern, survivable, and precise missile systems, and a strategic doctrine that collapses under real-world pressure. The reality of Pakistan's missile arsenal. Let's break down the arsenal behind the Rocket Force Command. On paper, Pakistan's military maintains multiple rocket and missile systems, from short-range NASA battlefield rockets through Shaheen and Ghaznavi ballistic missiles to imported Chinese cruise missiles and aging Soviet-era weapons. For years, these have been shown in parades, used as political signals, and described in grandiose terms in state media. But military reality is not a parade ground. Most of Pakistan's conventional rocket artillery is short-legged, imprecise, and easily detected by Indian intelligence. The few longer-range ballistic missiles, Shaheen Ghaznavi, are either widely acknowledged as paired with nuclear payloads, or if conventionally armed, lack the penetrative power or accuracy to threaten hardened military assets. Imported systems from China or Turkey are often less advanced than India's indigenous production lines, and critically, have not proven survivable against modern electronic warfare and jamming. Operation Synindua proved that in real combat, Pakistan's rockets cannot reach, disrupt, or even meaningfully threaten India's critical infrastructure. Any attempt to mass fire is met with rapid detection, electronic countermeasures, and rapid retaliation against launcher positions. Missiles that are paraded in Islamabad are quickly neutralized on the battlefield by Indian counterstrikes. Contrast this with India's own arsenal. The Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launcher, now in Mark II and extended-range variants, covers almost all likely battlefield depths from the frontline to deep logistics sites. The Pralay tactical ballistic missile brings GPS-independent accuracy far beyond anything in the Pakistani inventory. BrahMos cruise missiles can be air, land, or sea-launched and have repeatedly demonstrated strike success against both fixed and moving targets in wargames. India's systems are modular, easily uploaded with new technology, and thanks to a vibrant private and public sector, are produced in large numbers, giving India the ability to sustain and mass fire far longer than Pakistan. Simply put, Pakistan's rocket force was outdated before the ink dried on its formation orders. The trap of doctrinal escalation, Pakistan's first-use paradox. But the deeper problem is not physical, it's doctrinal. For 2 decades, Pakistan's nuclear strategy has been to threaten first use. If Indian conventional forces ever drive deep or threaten to sever key territory or cities, this policy is not secret. It is a cornerstone of Pakistan's entire deterrence philosophy and a staple of regional nuclear stability debates. Originally, this threat was supposed to offset India's conventional strength, a kind of insurance policy whereby any Indian operational win would come at the risk of unthinkable nuclear escalation. But like all insurance, it has strings attached. The logic is circular. The more Pakistan depends on first use, the less credibility its conventional rocket force actually possesses. Why? Because India and the world cannot tell the difference in the heat of war between a conventionally armed Pakistani missile and a nuclear one, especially since Pakistan's doctrine explicitly pairs the same missile systems with both payloads. Any large-scale use of Shaheen, Ghaznavi, or similar missiles becomes a trigger for worst-case scenario planning. Indian policy is blunt. Any detected launch of a nuclear-capable missile in a conflict, regardless of stated intent, will be taken as escalation to the nuclear level and answered with massive, overwhelming retaliation, targeting not just military infrastructure, but by declared doctrine, the sources of command and national will. In effect, the very option Pakistan hoped would give it flexibility, the ability to signal or retaliate conventionally with its best missiles, has been taken off the table by its own vocal threats. Any serious missile launch now carries the risk of total national destruction, not just military defeat. India, by contrast, has publicly and consistently refused to adopt first use and has built its missile programs around this clear, disciplined doctrine. This means every Indian launch, BrahMos, Pinaka, Pralay, and the growing number of new systems, can be assumed conventional unless and until nuclear use is confirmed. This gives India first-move advantage, enabling them to conduct deep, repeated, and escalated strikes in war without triggering international condemnation or risking nuclear annihilation. During Synindua, for example, India launched dozens of BrahMos cruise missiles, platforms that, in theory, could carry nuclear warheads, but did not, thanks to their doctrine and international assurances. Pakistan and the world were forced to absorb these operations as conventional, while any similar attempt in reverse would have crossed India's red line and brought disaster. Technology and escalation. Why Pakistan's arsenal is obsolete. Why has India leapt ahead while Pakistan stagnates? 2 reasons: democracy and innovation. India's missile programs are accountable to a vast ecosystem of public debate, technological partnerships, and constant performance reviews. Each failure, be it a dud test or an operational mishap, sparks a cycle of improvement, open discussion, and real investment in next-generation technology. Pakistan, ruled for decades by a centralized military and bureaucratic elite, operates its missile programs in secrecy, without meaningful civilian oversight or public pressure. Procurement is slow, risk-averse, and heavily based on foreign imports, a model that guarantees technological lag and makes it difficult to correct errors exposed in real fighting. In Pakistan, a failed missile is often hidden, not fixed. If a launch fails, press is restricted, and face-saving narratives are spun for the public. In India, a failed missile is front-page news, forcing officials to answer to parliament, the media, and their competitors, all of which gives pressure and velocity to improvement. The result, each year, India's arsenal grows more networked, more accurate, and more survivable. Systems like Pinaka and Pralay move on roads, hide in rapid deployment locations, and can be refueled or reloaded in minutes. Pakistani launchers, by contrast, struggle with mobility, must be protected from forward movement, and rely on communications and targeting infrastructure that is known to Indian intelligence. International isolation and the diminishing value of nuclear sponsorship. Pakistan's nuclear and missile status once brought it both global attention and strategic support, funds from the US and China in the name of stability, and for a while, a degree of diplomatic leverage. But Operations Synindua and the creation of the Rocket Force Command after defeat have changed perceptions. Allies now see an organization born from panic, not progress. They are less willing to give away their best systems, fearing operational exposure or global backlash if Pakistani weapons are used recklessly. And while India's missile diplomacy, through projects like the BrahMos program with Russia, joint ventures with France and Israel, and an open tech marketplace, reaps not just partnership but real mutual benefit. Each innovation is shared, tested, publicized, and quickly turned into military advantage. In the next full-scale conflict, the first question each outside observer will ask is not who has more rockets, but whose rockets work under fire, and how does their doctrine shape the path to escalation. By that measure, Pakistan's rocket force is not a shield, but a liability, a dangerous, destabilizing symbol of military inertia and overreach. The costs at home, why the rocket force deepens Pakistan's crisis. All these failures come at steep, real-world costs for the Pakistani people. Each year, billions of rupees are diverted from education, healthcare, infrastructure, and disaster relief to build up an arsenal and command system that cannot credibly be used. Every failed procurement is paid for twice, once in lost money and again in lost international trust. This is not just an abstract problem for generals or foreign ministries. It plays out in every budget debate, every missed opportunity to invest in what really matters to ordinary people's lives. In the age of digital transparency, every failure is revealed faster and with more lasting damage. Satellite imagery, social media, and independent journalists make it impossible for any government to hide when investments return nothing on the battlefield. The myth of Pakistan's Rocket Force Command has become, in the eyes of experts and adversaries alike, a chilling case study of how military doctrine can become a self-imposed cage. Far from creating new options, Pakistan's persistent clinging to nuclear first use and its inability to update rocket and missile technology leaves it perpetually boxed in, neither able to act freely nor to credibly deter real threats. Consider the doctrinal dead end that now defines Pakistan's strategic mindset. In any real conflict, the use of long-range rockets or ballistic missiles by the Rocket Force Command risks catastrophic misunderstanding. Since these systems are all dual-capable, able to carry conventional or nuclear warheads, every launch carries a fog of ambiguity. Did Pakistan fire a conventional rocket, or is it a nuclear-tipped weapon meant as a demonstration or a decapitation strike? No Indian or global authority is willing to wait and find out. As Indian doctrine makes explicit, any such launch will be interpreted as a possible nuclear use and will be met by maximum retaliation, ending any war in devastation beyond recovery. Pakistan, locked into this logic by years of public threats and doctrinal rigidity, cannot use its rocket force for real strategic effect without risking its own destruction. Its officers know this, its strategists know this, and so do India's planners. The effect on Pakistan's military psychology is corrosive. Junior officers question the futility of building up a force they can never use. Soldiers and engineers pour years into systems that in training seem potent, but in combat are revealed as either obsolete or too dangerous to employ. Every day spent rehearsing full-spectrum deterrence is a day diverted from operational improvement, tactical innovation, or honest self-critique. In public, to mask this impotence, Pakistan's leaders and media double down on nuclear bluster. They threaten, posture, and insist on red lines, hoping to inject anxiety into New Delhi or Washington, but the world has learned to see through this performance. India, after all, faces its own critics, voters, and the relentless transparency of political and media debate. It calls Pakistan's bluff with precision strikes, public declarations, and most important, visible, functioning missile forces backed up by global partnerships and a public commitment to no first use. Meanwhile, in every budget and policy cycle, Pakistan's rocket and nuclear fixations extract an ever heavier toll. Money that might have bought new power plants, modern schools, health clinics, or even smarter electronic warfare is squandered on aging missiles, failed interceptors, and headquarters bureaucracies. International investors, sensitive to risk, see these choices not as markers of strength, but as desperate attempts to mask vulnerability. India, by contrast, operates in a different gear. With every failure or gap exposed, public and institutional self-correction fuels next-generation research, private partnership, and rapid fielding of new capabilities. As China, the United States, and Europe race into hypersonic glide weapons, intelligent drones, and networked missile swarms, India is in step, supplying its own needs and building credibility as both a military and a technology leader in the Indo-Pacific. The practical consequences for the next collision are stark and sobering. If Pakistan's rocket force tries to escalate with a barrage of long-range missiles, Indian sensors will identify, track, and if possible, neutralize them. Any they cannot destroy in flight will be assumed to carry nuclear warheads, immediately justifying, on policy and in practice, a strategic response that no country, much less a smaller, economically frail Pakistan, could survive. India, meanwhile, can strike with speed, mass, and ambiguity. Its no first-use pledge ensures that even if a volley of BrahMos or Pralay missiles land in force on Pakistani infrastructure, the world must treat the attack as conventional, reserving judgment until actual nuclear use is detected. This gives India every advantage: flexibility in offense, escalation control, and the credibility of a responsible global power. Even traditional advantages of geography and surprise are fading. India's investments in networked command, mobile launch platforms, and rapid recon mean rocket and missile units can be retargeted, hidden, and masked in new ways. Their doctrines evolve every year in line with changing global best practices, sophisticated enough for nuclear stalemate, flexible enough to win in conventional fights. In contrast, Pakistan's rocket force operates under the same tired threat doctrines it articulated a generation ago. Its models are North Korea and, to a lesser extent, Cold War Soviet concepts, systems predicated on fear, uncertainty, and mutual destruction, but without the technological depth or economic weight to make those threats enduring or credible. The psychological toll is greatest at home. Every year, as rocket force budgets grow and social needs go unmet, Pakistan's citizens are confronted with a widening chasm, the gap between what their military says it can do and what reality proves it cannot. A parade of launch vehicles cannot cover up dead schools or blackout-stricken hospitals, and every operational failure, instantly shared across the world on satellite and mobile video, erodes what little faith remains in official claims. India's own population, while patriotic and security-conscious, increasingly expects not just deterrence but resilience, the ability to keep critical services running, to retaliate with minimal escalation risk, and to innovate for tomorrow's fight, not yesterday's. Indian democracy, for all its challenges, ensures that public pressure will always drive crisis adaptation, accountability, and honest technical debate. As cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, and drone swarms spread across global battlefields, the question for both nations becomes one of vision. Will Pakistan's rocket force remain a dead-end institution, sapping resources and multiplying risks? Or will Pakistan, forced by pressure and circumstance, shift to a doctrine of real restraint, one that emphasizes survivability, second-strike capability, and modernization without idle threats? Can Pakistan stop treating its missiles as political theater and instead find the humility to reform? Or will each new command only lock the country deeper into irrelevance and insecurity? And for India, the lesson is equally sharp. Complacency kills. Every advantage won through reform and innovation must be defended against both external change and internal inertia. Indian society must continue insisting on transparency, technological edge, and political clarity, because adversaries will, eventually, learn and attempt to adapt. At the frontier of strategy, The difference is not who shouts loudest about their rockets or boasts of spectacular response. The real difference is who can use modern missiles as tools, not just symbols of operational dominance. India can, because it innovates, corrects, and acts with clarity. Pakistan's Rocket Force Command, by contrast, is a warning, a force built on yesterday's myth, trapped by today's fear, and unless it changes, irrelevant to tomorrow's battlefield. If Pakistan's Rocket Force Command is a monument to the dangers of doctrine divorced from reality, its impact is felt far beyond Pakistan's own borders. Regional security, global non-proliferation, and even the stability of international aid and investment in South Asia are now shaped by the visible failure of this command and the growing gap between rhetoric and substance. Globally, allies and rivals alike take notice when a nation responds to military embarrassment not by fixing what is broken, but by clamoring for new headlines, new uniformed commands, and new slogans. Pakistan's scramble to stand up a rocket force after the public failure of Operation Synindua sends a clear signal to friends in Beijing, Washington, and Riyadh. Money and equipment poured in are likely to be wasted. Arms sales may still happen, but best-in-class technology will be withheld, training missions shortened, and political support qualified by skepticism. International non-proliferation efforts, already under stress, come under further threat when a known nuclear state builds bureaucracy around a doctrine of ambiguous first use, encouraging proliferation by example, not by restraint. The more Pakistan tries to assert deterrence through show and bluster, the more it normalizes crisis instability for other states, especially those watching along the belt of the Middle East, Africa, and East Asia. In the region, India reads these moves as confirmation that its own path, constant technological renewal, discipline in doctrine, and a refusal to bluff about nuclear thresholds, is both validated and urgently required. Each visible failure of Pakistan's rocket experiment strengthens calls in India for even greater investment in counterforce and intelligence, smarter preemption doctrines, and ever more robust civil-military coordination. Meanwhile, smaller South Asian and Gulf states, seeing Pakistan's gamble, double down on crisis resilience. There is less appetite for joint ventures in missile technology with a nation that cannot guarantee its own escalation control. More effort is spent shoring up local air defenses and securing trusted partnerships with nations that offer real strategic stability. For ordinary Pakistanis, the legacy is felt most acutely not in the rare spectacle of fiery rocket launches, but in the slow burn of missing infrastructure, underpaid teachers, and unaffordable medicine. As more budgets are swallowed by the rocket force and its failed promise of power, patience with national priorities frays. The myth of a great equalizer dies with every visible operational failure, replaced by questions no parade can answer. Why not invest in health, jobs, and the next generation if the promise of missiles always ends in emptiness? True reform would begin with the hardest step, honesty. Retire the doctrines that have failed, move away from nuclear ambiguity and toward a verifiable, responsible second strike posture. Open procurement to non-military oversight, civilian experts, and real international collaboration. Invest first in survivability, accuracy, and layered national defense, not in one-shot prestige projects or photo ops. Only with such a pivot could any future Pakistani missile force hope to defend the country instead of endangering it. For India, the task is to translate advantage into stewardship. A secure, dominant position in regional missile warfare comes with its own responsibilities: transparency, continued public debate, and the cultivation of strategic self-restraint. Every Indian missile advance should answer real threats, not manufactured ones. Every new weapon or tactic must shore up stability, not undermine it. There is a lesson here for every military and every society that believes technology alone, absent democratic feedback, innovation, and humility, can solve fundamental security dilemmas. Rocket forces, by their nature, are symbols, but only those that back up their symbolism with discipline, performance, and accountability will shape outcomes that matter. As another generation of South Asians contemplates their future, the starkest image may not be the missile on a parade float, but the empty classroom, the blacked-out clinic, or the young innovator emigrating for lack of opportunity. Armies and commands may posture, but nations find their strength in the lived reality of their people, not in tools that cannot be used or threats that cannot be carried out without inviting national disaster. Ultimately, the story of Pakistan's Rocket Force Command is a cautionary tale about the limits of spectacle and the dangers of doctrine disconnected from capability. Born in the ashes of defeat after Operation Synindua, it is less a leap into the future than a desperate echo of the past, a fresh coat of paint on a crumbling, outdated arsenal. For the soldiers and engineers tasked with manning this force, the contradiction is painful and daily. They are sworn to defend a nation with rockets that either cannot reach the enemy or cannot be used without risking annihilation. Every operational review, every exercise, and every news cycle reminds them that real deterrence now requires more than parading launchers or issuing bold threats. It requires investments in science, in industry, in the open exchange of ideas, and the honest measurement of results. For Pakistan's rulers, the Rocket Force Command is a masking agent for embarrassment, not an answer to military inferiority. It shows how easy it is for leaders to reach for new slogans and new bureaucracy when faced by failure, instead of pursuing the much harder path of reform that faces up to the truth. First, use nuclear threats trap the country, not save it. Rockets that can be intercepted or retaliated against are liabilities, not shields. And for ordinary Pakistanis, the very existence of this force deepens a national crisis of priorities. Every rupee spent on maintaining and posturing with obsolete missiles is a rupee not invested in clean water, reliable electricity, safe roads, or a world-class education system. The security promised be. Why the rocket force never arrives, but the sacrifice for it, paid in daily life by millions, is all too real. Across the border, India's trajectory is a case study in what relentless innovation, accountability, and flexible doctrine can achieve. Indian democracy, for all its messiness, keeps military ambitions in dialogue with public need, market reality, and global best practice. Its missile forces are modern because its system is open, adaptive, and subject to question. As new technologies emerge, hypersonics, AI, energy weapons, and cyber warfare, the fate of forces like Pakistan's Rocket Command offers an enduring warning. The only missiles that really deter are those backed by a credible, sustainable, and transparent national strategy. The only doctrines that matter are those that can balance necessity with responsibility. In the end, power in South Asia and everywhere is not about who boasts loudest, but who learns, reforms, and puts their people first. True security is not just the absence of war. It is the presence of hope. Hope that children will inherit more than parades, that technology will serve the people, and that a nation's strength will be measured not by empty threats, but by the opportunities and safety it builds for all. That is the real lesson of Pakistan's new Rocket Force Command. Unless it changes, it stands as a monument to what not to do, and an urgent invitation for a new path, where openness, adaptability, and the will of the people dictate the true shape of power.